Hello there. Happy New Year, and welcome to the third episode of the Hiroto podcast series, where I really just take some time to discuss different topics across Africa, which to me is very interesting to see some different things that are happening on our planet. And so, to start 2025, our first topic is South Sudan, the newest country in the world. South Sudan is seeing a little bit of conflict right now, so let's just go into the basics to start. South Sudan officially became an independent nation on July 9th, 2011, the most recent country. Following decades of conflict, it was the culmination of a long struggle for autonomy from Sudan. So basically, it was long in a conflict. They wanted to break free from Sudan for a long time. Sudan is the larger country to the north. And for context, Sudan itself has been embroiled in civil war for most of its modern history. The first civil war in Sudan lasted from 1955 to 1972, and there was another war after that began in 1983 and ended in 2004 2005. And that second war ended with the signing of the CPA, which is the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. And so the CPA granted the people of South Sudan the right to vote in a referendum of independence. On January 11th, that vote took place. Right there, you can see the picture. And the result was overwhelming. Nearly 99% of South Sudanese people voted to secede from Sudan. And so their dreams of freedom and self determination came true. But the challenges were only beginning. South Sudan's first president, Salva Kiir Mayardit, was a key figure in the independence movement. So, the independence movement that helped South Sudan secede from Sudan. He was a former commander in the Sudan People's Liberation Army. So, the SPLA was like a group of people who were advocating for South Sudan's freedom. And he became the face of the new nation. He's the leader. And just a fun fact about Salva, you'll never see him without his trademark black cowboy hat, a gift from former US President George W. Bush, which became a symbol of his leadership. So you'll pretty much in every public appearance he has, he's always got that cowboy hat on. But despite all this, building a country from scratch is no small feat. South Sudan faced a lot of hurdles, such as a lack of infrastructure, low literacy rates, and deep ethnic divisions. And so basically, Africa's countries are not, these people are not actually united by the country. The country's boundaries were technically made by the Europeans when Europeans colonized parts of Africa. Africa actually has many different ethnic groups, like tribes, and those were the boundaries before Europeans just grouped them together and colonized them. And so South Sudan is an exception to this. We'll see later the ethnic divisions of South Sudan. And so, despite these challenges, the world watched with hope as the new nation embarked on its journey. But after South Sudan gained its independence, roughly about 2 years later, the independence story took a tragic turn. The country did plummet into civil war, and the roots of this conflict, as I said before, do lay in political and ethnic tensions. And so the president, Salva Kiir, was a Dinka, and his former vice president, Riek Machar, was a Nuer. And these belong to different tribes. They have different traditions and beliefs, and so there was conflict. These tensions erupted into violence, and what began as a political dispute did quickly escalate into ethnic conflict. And so communities were torn apart, atrocities were committed on both sides, and millions of South Sudanese people were displaced. They lost their homes, and of course, many lost their lives. And so, why did this happen? The problem was really just the lack of a cohesive national identity. South Sudan is home to more than 60 ethnic groups. And so, this map right here, okay, the slideshow is refusing to cooperate. This map right here shows the distribution of ethnic groups across South Sudan. As you can see, there are many different colors. And so these different colors are not in agreement with each other. And you may start thinking, wow, that's a lot of tribes. And that is the root of conflict in the country. During the independence struggle from Sudan, these groups were united by one common enemy, the government of Khartoum, which is the capital of Sudan. But that once that external threat was removed, once they gained the independence, the tribes began, like, internal divisions were coming to the surface. The tribes were becoming in disagreement once again. But this wasn't the only factor. Another factor was the lack of economic stability. South Sudan is rich in oil, but it relies heavily on pipelines that run through Sudan to export its resources. And so disputes over oil revenue and border demarcation further strained relations between the two countries. And also, there was a lot of corruption in the government. Mismanagement prevented the wealth from reaching ordinary citizens. And so many South Sudanese people were left without proper funding from the government and no support. It's not really their fault. It's not the government's fault either. But these conflicts were basically preventing the country from improving its conditions. And many people who were displaced were put in camps. And these camps, people were left without food and everything like that. And so the civil war officially ended in 2018 with the signing of a peace agreement. But the scars in South Sudan still remain. Over 4 million South Sudanese people were displaced during the conflict, and many are still in refugee camps. So UNICEF set up these refugee camps for tribes who are being, like, attacked, and you'll still find them today. Food and insecurity and poverty continue to plague the nation. However, efforts to rebuild have been slow but ongoing. The revitalized peace agreement was was signed in 2018, and this peace agreement brought Salva Kiir, which was the Dinka president, and Riek Machar, who was the newer president. They were brought into a fragile power sharing agreement. So the violence did decrease from that. It was a compromise in the government. That's better than having complete disagreement. So the peace is tenuous and has much more work needs to be done, but it was definitely a progress. Whew, so that was a lot. But despite all of these challenges, there is hope for South Sudan. Its people are resilient, and the international community, so other countries around the world, continue to support efforts for peace and development in South Sudan. And organizations across the globe are working on rebuilding infrastructure, improving education, and addressing food insecurity. They're trying to build schools, they're importing more goods to the people. But the number one thing is that for South Sudanese people to thrive, its leaders must prioritize unity over division. I feel like that's really important. And invest in the future of their people. The road ahead is long, but the spirit of independence that birthed this nation in 2011 is still bright. The future of South Sudan is bright. The people under South Sudan are one. And so that is where we are ending for our third episode of Hiroto's Around Africa podcast. I hope that was interesting, and I will see you in the next video. Stay tuned because the next video will be about why South Africa has 3 national capitals. Thank you.